Coping mechanisms. We all have them. Some are more prevalent than others. As children, we tend to develop our own strategies to cope with certain situations and circumstances, even though we don't quite know that we're doing it at the time. These strategies, good and bad, flow in and out of our lives. As the school year gets into full gear, in addition to the normal trials and tribulations of adolescence, now add in and throw in stigmas like ADD, ADHD, gifted, intellectual disability, learning disorders, and different aspects of the spectrum. Pile on top of that anxiety, depression, bullying, identity issues, and we almost get that sense that it is an uphill battle that sometimes just seems daunting to fight. Joining us today is Everett Lawrence Adams, a clinical and educational psychologist. EL, as he is known, is looking to share ideas, philosophies, and methods he's using to help our youth thrive in sometimes the most difficult of situations. He's using methods as well like mental health, mood, and music. So welcome to Living Your Life with Lianne Laing, the podcast brought to you by Extension Marketing. And as always, for more information, you can head to extensionmarketing.com. EL, great to have you here on the show. I appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
I would say you're coming all the way to us from North Carolina, but that's not necessarily the case, but those were the earlier days. Am I right?
North Carolina by way of Ottawa and Nova Scotia. Yeah.
And by way of clinic in Kingston, reaching the greater areas around it. I found your story to be really quite interesting, and I'm really excited for our chat today.
Yes, me too. Just coming to Canada, born and raised in North Carolina, high schools. I just ventured off to different areas. Prep school in Boston led me to Nova Scotia, where I played basketball and studied psychology. It's just been a lifelong task or I guess the experience of taking risks, going to different places, doing different things.
Yeah, there's a lot of that. You actually just in that like 10 seconds of explanations just took a whole bunch of really great stories.
Yeah.
And we're going to kind of we're going to expand back because interesting, like really an interesting childhood, but the decision even, and I think for some student athletes to make a decision to leave home and to go to these prep schools, where I think in the States prep schools are kind of they're a pretty big deal.
Huge, yeah.
You know, that was really the start of these venturing outside of the traditional kind of thinking of staying home and trying something new. But you had hoped it would be a little bit more on the athletic endeavor side than what you realized going to Andover, Mass, and then finding out that most of your teammates and your roommates were going to be heading off to Yales and Harvards.
Oh, yes, definitely. Well, my mom she's from Oklahoma. So she's from Oklahoma. She moved to Charlotte, North Carolina with my dad when they were married. And she said you have to make your world bigger than Charlotte. Charlotte can't be the end-all, be-all. There's a lot of world out there. And I don't have too much of a problem flying, so just going to the prep school in Boston or outside of Boston, Andover, Massachusetts. I was looking for opportunities to expand my basketball career and get a lot of looks from colleges because I'm shorter. I'm 5'9", and I wasn't this guy who could dunk and fly through the sky. So this was an opportunity for me to play basketball against some major competition. But this school, I mean, there were some great athletes there. Don't get me wrong, but it was really more academic, and this was my first struggles academically because high school was a breeze for me. And the different curriculums and the different strategies I was using in high school didn't match the task and the challenges in prep school.
What did you find at that point was the main difference? Was it just the educational system? Was it the expectations placed on you being in a more elitist or a more competitive environment?
It was just the curriculum was different. In high school, I could finish my homework, and I don't feel bad about saying this. I could do my homework while the morning announcements was on. I was kind of just chilling at home, playing basketball, doing whatever. And the next day, I would do my homework in the mornings, where this required a lot more dedication, a lot more expansion on your thoughts. So it wasn't a simple go in and do the routine. You had to go in there and you had to think and put some effort into it and formulate these answers that was acceptable for the teachers. So it was just a different circumstance that I was using old strategies with that didn't match.
So old strategies, new strategies. I'm going to take it as we get further into the podcast. We'll be able to expand on how some of these strategies can work for some and not for others. You managed to get through. I mean, you finished the year.
Oh, yeah. I passed. I passed, yeah.
But the point was that you had hoped to play college basketball.
Yeah, right? I was looking for D1, Division I. And the biggest knock, again, with my size was he's small. He can't endure a full year D1 competition, Division One, sorry. And so I was kind of recruiting myself past the schools that were local into Massachusetts. I wanted to go somewhere bigger, brighter. Everybody has the dream of going pro. And I'm thinking, I'm playing against some major people and I'm faring pretty well against them. But, I don't know what the future holds with me, again, being 5'9". So I recruited myself, made a wrong phone call to St. Francis Xavier in Antigonish, Nova Scotia, when I was aiming for St. Francis Xavier in some town in Pennsylvania.
That's really a call, or maybe it's, a higher power or whatever it was that was guiding you into this phone call. You hadn't meant to call St. FX.
Not at all.
In Nova Scotia. And yet it was the right call, or this mistake ended up being a great kind of pathway for where you would eventually end up.
For sure. Yeah, it was. You go through this blue book. It's a blue book of recruitment, and it has all these schools in there. And somehow I'm looking at St. Francis Xavier in Pennsylvania, but I called the number in Nova Scotia. And the coach was pretty persistent. And it led to me coming to a new world of Canada. I'd been to Canada once, Montreal, when I was like 5 years old. And all I can remember was St. Hubert.
Yeah, they have great gravy, though.
Yeah, that's all I can remember. And then I come to Canada, and it opens up a new world for me, a new way of thinking, a lot more, and I feel a lot more diversity. So I was learning from roommates who were from India, roommates who were all Caribbean. Growing up back home, most of the black population is just African American, not so much Caribbean or African, but just African American. So learned a lot. Polish friends, Serbian. One of my best friends is Serbian. So it gave me this new world of diversity and changing the lens of which I look through at things.
Well, can you kind of expand on that? Is it the way you felt our country, our system, our melting pot works a little bit differently than maybe how it was where you were growing up in North Carolina?
Yeah, well, I found here people at home in North Carolina, it's the Deep South, it's the Bible Belt, so a lot of very rigid ideals, and God is law, and then legal law is second. So it was just more so people had questions, but they weren't attacking. They were more curious about my background. And I find at home they're more questioning and attacking versus being curious and being maybe a little bit more open-minded. Mm-hmm.
Or genuine, like genuinely asking you questions about, okay, what was the experience like, or what was, mm-hmm. I think they're actually just wanting to know you more as a person than anything else. Yeah. So you had a great run as a basketball player at St. FX. Was it a good couple of years? It was a great couple of years.
Out there too in Nova Scotia, it's kind of like, man, when you look at hospitality, they're really, really warm and welcoming. People are always asking you to come over for Thanksgiving. But basketball was awesome. I mean, I walked in my first 2 years. I don't have them with me, but I have back-to-back championship rings. We went as far as we could go. We had very, very dominant team. In my first 2 years, it was a blessing and it was a great activity, or it was a great experience. But at the same time, that led me to believe this is how it's supposed to be. So the third year, when our major players moved on and graduated, and I ran into some loss and some difficult years of playing basketball. But it was still pretty productive and successful on the most part.
When you were at school, what were you studying?
I started off in marketing and business. I wanted to be on Wall Street and make all this dough and kind of wheel and deal. And first year or first semester, I was struggling, and Coach Konchalski out in Nova Scotia, he was saying, you need to pick this up or else you're not going to be on the team. I've promised your mom and dad this and that, so you need to pick this up. And it was just, I found it really boring. And not to say that I had boring teachers, just the material was just not so interesting. So luckily, my second semester, I had to find a elective that matched with our practice schedule, and it happened to be forensic psychology. And then as soon as I hit the school or hit the class, it was just mind-blowing, and it wasn't a struggle to go to class anymore.
What was it about the forensic psychology that hit you so much that it was almost like that you were inspired to learn again?
Well, forensic psych was more so analyzing, eyewitness testimony. You're making it a little bit more practical, and when I look back, I've always been interested in profiles, bios of famous people, and just understanding how people tick. Like, I'm a people watcher. I can sit down somewhere with, ice cream or something and watch people go by for hours and not really be bored of it.
Okay, so let me ask you this. When you're sitting there having your ice cream at this stage, are you watching children at play? Are you watching children's relationship with siblings and parents? Like, where do you find your eyes go to as you're doing your people watching, knowing that you're dealing so much more with adolescents and youth now?
Just the story. Just trying to figure out, like, what's going on here. This person here has this face, they kind of balled up their face. Are they mad? Are they thinking? You see this dynamics between the family and the maybe the parents and I don't know, Walmart in survival mode, just trying to get this kid out of Walmart without having a hissy fit. It's just interesting to see people's walk and seeing how much alike and how different we are in the same span of things. Okay,
so you take this psychology course, forensic psych, which is not actually going to be the path that you follow in terms of the work that you are doing. Mm-hmm. What then is the path that you follow that eventually lands you here with the fact that you're dealing with youth and with adolescents and especially with education? Because that's a big, I look at you and it's like, that's a big heart. These are issues, these are parts of a person's life that will really create a stronger foundation for who they are for the rest of their life. So that's a big ask on someone.
It is, but I think like I'm a product of I call my tribe, and it's not just parents, it's not just family members, it's my best friends. Like, we had a crew of 5, and around the circle of our neighborhood, if one parent saw you stepping out of line, they were going to check that in the moment. I have coaches, I have a lot of mentors and advisors, and just having someone to always go to depending on the circumstances that I was facing. I think everybody can benefit from having somebody to offer input, offer guidance that may not be the easiest to swallow at times, but it's still good for you. So I think being just one of those tribe members of the youth, or even the parents or the family or the community, it just appeals to me because, as we say back home, it's just one to grow on. I'm trying to give somebody one to grow on and become a different person, essentially growth.
So at what point in the studies do you realize that educational psychology is going to be something that you're going to then spend more time with? I know you took some special courses. I know that the education was really then focused,
yeah. You go through the whole program of psychology, but even then, it wasn't going to be a psychological career. I was, I guess, fairly young, 22, 23, so I'm still trying to pursue this basketball thing, and I'm getting looks from people overseas, and they say, yeah, we can work with this, but it starts to prolong, and you start to become 25, and I was like, well, I don't want to wait on this forever. So I go back home, and I got a lot of hookups in Charlotte, so I'm getting jobs here, jobs there, working with the school board. And I'm being, we call it assistant teacher, substitute teacher. You call them supply teachers here. Mm-hmm. So I'm supplying day by day. And then I realized, man, the classroom is not for me. Like, these are a lot of people to manage, and it's just difficult for my personality. But given my psychology background, I'm saying, well, I can still work with the school board in some type of capacity and not have to be in the classroom. So if you have a psychology bachelor's, it's hard to get a job in that field doing something one-on-one or therapeutical or what have you. So I'm just thinking about it, and then my mom says, you should probably go to grad school. And I come from a house of, well, the women in my family, my mom and my sister, they're scholars. My sister's actually gifted. Me and my dad, we're kind of just we're more practical people. But my mom suggested it, and I was like, I'm not the best student, Ma. And she's like, no, you can. You just have to really focus. And then going to grad school, I applied to the same one my sister went. She's not a psychologist, but she's a deaf and hearing impaired teacher in Atlanta, Georgia. So same school, different program. I go and I realize that I'm a lot more focused. I'm a lot more mature, but because of the poor academic success of just passing classes at St. FX, now it's a struggle to get in grad school. So I went in under the gun and provisionally, and I had to really prove myself. So, but once I got in, it was just flying through the skies easily.
What were the classes? What was it that you enjoyed and know that you were going to take back to the students?
Just therapeutic modalities. So how you're going to approach, you can really choose from so many approaches, and understanding that people all have a story, we all have a background, and helping people navigate and reflect. I'm really big on reflection. I call it mirror time. If you can look in a mirror and really reflect on your experiences, which is hard for a lot of 12-year-olds to do because they're only 12. What experiences have they had? 16, I tell them, you probably just started making decisions about sleeping, about picking out your own clothes, when you want to eat, probably 3 or 4 years ago when you're 16, when you had complete autonomy of, I want to eat this, or where the house is having, rice and beans. Really, I prefer to make my own sandwich over here. Okay, that's fine. You can do that. But helping people reflect and helping people find the lessons in maybe their difficulties or their challenges is really, really appealing to me.
So what is it that you're actually doing now? You've been in the workforce. You've got, an aspect of the clinical side. You've got work with the board. So when someone says, what exactly do you do? How do you describe it?
I guess an umbrella term would be intervention. I provide interventions or help with interventions. Been with the school board 9 years here in the Ottawa District School Board, 2 years previously in small towns of Tennessee, and now 3 years going into 4 years of private practice. So there's a different beast between private practice and the school board. But essentially, you're providing interventions of some sort. The school board will say we have this referral for a student who needs, therapy, who's dealing with anxiety or who's having anger issues, maybe self-image or self-esteem, self-concept. And sometimes I do assessments as an intervention. So we're trying to explore the learning profile. And that usually you give a cognitive test, educational tests, and you mix those results together and you try to examine where the themes and the strengths and weaknesses are. Sometimes you'll give emotional interventions. And I love music. I think music is therapy. So that's one of my key things that I got from my thesis, and I use that to open the door for conversation. Talk therapy is only as good as the person who wants to talk. If people don't want to talk, then it's going to be really, really difficult. And usually at the adolescent age, parents are the ones who want it for their kids. Kids aren't really volunteering and saying, yeah, I want to go talk to somebody. You do have that, but often it's the parents really initiating this. So music allows people to speak about something indirectly, but it really does reflect what they're feeling.
This is the mental health, mood, music,
yeah.
right? Okay,
Mm-hmm.
so I want to get to that. Yeah. One of the things, though, before I think any parent gets to that stage, mm-hmm. is that they're looking, on that first day of school, you send them off and hoping everything is going to be, they're going to come home and they're going to love their teacher and they're going to love how recess was, and you have these high expectations that things are just going to be rosy rainbows and unicorns, mm-hmm. and oftentimes that's not the case. In that you become part of the system of maybe a possible learning disability, behavioral. You have ADD, ADHD. Yep. You have dyslexia. You have, then is when you start the checklist of just being able to have a child go through the system properly. Yep. You're dealing with a number of different factors, and then if you're on top of things and if you can have the financial means to be able to get them tested without having to wait the long wait list that there would be to get through the school board, you're investing in these tests so that they can get an IEP. There's so much that's mm-hmm. placed, it's just layers of things placed on parents and children just to be able to get through the system mm-hmm. in one piece.
Well, it can be a foreign language. It's hard to navigate. And it all depends on the presenting issues. And once we come to the point where intervention is required, we go through tiers, and this is all probably going to be, again, a foreign language to people, but you go through tiers of intervention of what you can do within the house, within the school.
Okay, which are like what?
Classroom-based interventions. So maybe the teacher gives a little bit more strategies for one student in particular, but she addresses it, or he or she, they address it to the classroom so everyone can use it. It's this, it's going to slip me, but there's a model where they say is beneficial for a few, but helpful for all. If you have that model, so let's say a kid who has a tough time remembering the order or the sequence of instructions, step 1, do this, step 2, do this, step 3, do this, then you would ask the teacher, okay, well, if he has a tough time, we would say that's probably short-term auditory memory. Let's put something on the board on the top right-hand corner and say step 1 is this, step 2, so on and so forth. So then that one kid who you know, or maybe it's usually 2 or 3 kids within the classroom who's struggling with this particular issue, it addresses their issue, but it also helps the others who say, yeah, you know what, I can refer to this. I can refer to this if I am slipping somewhere or I forget what's going on. And then once classroom interventions are unsuccessful, and you want to make sure that you try these things. You say, you can't try something in a day and expect it to work. It has to be time. I'm from a developmental background, so development is what we're constantly doing throughout our lifespan. But to plant the seeds, and I say, think about when your kid started walking. It wasn't just a straight up and start walking 2 feet. No, it was some stumbling. It was some bum falling. It was all these things that led to them being able to walk at the end. So let's help these kids develop. And sometimes it's planting a seed for a kid to say, okay, this is helpful. I see my teacher do it. I see my mom do it. Maybe I can incorporate this into my daily practice, but it's the application of it. So once you have tried a considerable amount of time, appropriate amount of time in the classroom, then it moves to what we would call out of classroom type of intervention. Now it's a pull out. So for a kid who struggles with reading in the classroom and you've had some hovering, you've had some scaffolding, now you bring them out to maybe a reading specialist or a reading teacher who helps them in a small group. And now they get a little bit more one-on-one or a little bit more attention within the small group. And then if that has been unsuccessful, then you would say, this is when at the school board, they call it learning support services. So that would be psychologists, social workers, speech language pathologists, and behavioral specialists. Then this is where we start to enter the case. And now we provide the intervention, such as an assessment to see this kid's learning profile. And if it warrants a diagnosis, then I would, of course, deliver that. But you want to say, we're looking at a kid's profile. We're not looking for a diagnosis. It's kind of like going to the doctor. I go to the doctor because I want him just to tell me what my symptoms are. Tell me what my symptoms are. And if we find something, good. But if you say, well, you just have a cough, okay, well, it doesn't warrant a flu, doesn't warrant, lung issues. You just have a cough. Cool. And how can I manage this?
But don't you find, and it just seems in my conversations with friends and with groups, that there are more and more issues that there's more children. Maybe it's just that we're discussing it more, but more children that are ending up on the autism spectrum, more kids that are being diagnosed with ADHD, more kids that are being diagnosed with learning disability, focus. Is it more prevalent now, or is it just that the children are more honest, the teachers are over, they have so much on their plate when they have massive sizes of classrooms.
For sure. It's difficult.
That you're trying to be able to find something that's going to help each individual child.
Yeah.
This podcast is brought to you by Extension Marketing. They are a new breed of marketing agency that acts as your virtual marketing department, designing and implementing cost-effective marketing strategies that will grow your business. I can speak to this personally, as I've been using the Extension Marketing team to help me launch and grow my business. Founder Pat Whalen has been a lifesaver for me, a genuine coach, guiding me along the way into uncharted territory. Tell them you're a friend of the show and receive a free 1-hour consultation. Check them out at extensionmarketing.com.
I think just to categorize things, there's always been learning disabilities. It's kind of like there's always been the flu. Back in the 1300s, there probably wasn't a doctor that says, oh yeah, these symptoms, that means you have the flu. There's always been learning challenges, so to speak. Now we have more of a focus on it. The push of mental health and awareness is all over social media and our daily lives. I don't know if it's more prevalent. And I think if you look at things, you have to say, based on this criteria on the DSM-5, the book Diagnostics and Statistical Manual, what we use to diagnose, we have criteria to follow. And if these kids or individuals meet this criteria, then good. But sometimes a challenge doesn't have to be a diagnosis. Sometimes this kid just has poor auditory memory, or they have short attention span doesn't really mean that you have ADHD, inattentive, or hyperactive, or combined. It just means that this kid, he struggles to attend to what's going on in this environment, because there's so much criteria you have to meet for me to professionally and ethically say this meets a diagnosis. But there are challenges, and I'll always try to explain to parents in our feedback. If you look at the classroom, if you look at the bell curve, this is representative of your classroom, and 50% are going to be in this average range. And then you'll have so much 25% above, 25% below. And within these challenges, like, everyone's not going to be a perfect student or an ideal student, but how can we help them learn the best? Because 28, 30 kids are in one classroom and expected to learn one way. Doesn't suit us all. I didn't learn until St. Avex that I'm a repetitive learner. I had a good friend, two good friends, one of them who was just a whiz, and another one who was my roommate, who sat on the couch all day, played video games, and he had the highest average on campus. It was just mind-blowing. So when I'm saying, well, he's doing it and I want to play video games, it didn't work for me. So learning how you learn and being able to retain that information it was called metacognition, learning how you learn. Learning that I was repetitive was really helpful. And once I clued into that.
What do you mean by repetitive? Just having to read over and over the same line? What are you referring to when you say that? I'm
repetitive. So in my situation, I have to write it. So I want to write it. I want to review it. And then I want to try to apply it to something that is more practical for me. In university, when you're listening to the teacher, I found it difficult to listen or to write. So I had to pick one. I say, well, I'm not going to he's listing all these things that are just kind of going in one ear and out the other. I want to be able to retain it as best as possible. So if I can write it and then cue in on certain things, and remember when this teacher one time who jumped up on the table, he was really eccentric, jumped up on the table. I said, oh, I can match this activity with this concept. But me, I have to revisit it. So the more and more I see it, the more and more I'm familiar with it. I equate studying with practicing. In basketball, you would practice something so that you've seen that monster. Like you gear up for this one team and you practice so that when it comes time for the performance, it's just an everyday activity. It's just an everyday practice. So with me, I have to study and study and study. So when I see it in the main performance of the test or exam or whatever, I'm familiar with it, and it's not a foreign concept to me.
How do parents or how do students then differentiate between what kind of a learner they are? You realize that you needed repetition. Mm-hmm. Are there tools? Are there things that parents can use? Or if you have, high schools, I know you're dealing with a lot of high school students, mm-hmm. for them to realize this is good to learn now, mm-hmm. how it is that I'm learning, so that I can actually use this over the course of my education.
Yeah, I'm auditory. I'm repetitive, and I'm practical. I have to do it. So you can give me a recipe. I like to eat. I'm not the best cook. Mm-hmm. So if you give me the recipe, it's very hard for me to do it initially by myself. One of my friend's wife, she is a very good cook, but she'll give me recipes, and I have to see her do it. So once I see you do it, then now I can emulate that. I can reproduce that, no problem. But if you just give it to me, I'm stuck often. I just end up doing what's easy for me. And metacognition is all about experience. There's no real strategies you can use to figure out how you learn, except for going through it yourself and saying, okay, well, I tried writing things down, and writing things down in the classroom wasn't helpful for me. I'd rather attend to the teacher. I'd rather watch the teacher and listen, and then I can go back into my book, and then I can maybe highlight major points. Or some people are more practical. So when it's the idea of reading something versus doing something. A lot of people struggle when you go to like med school or even in psychology. You have to go through the theory first and then you apply it. So just going through the practice of trying to figure out, I don't think people figure this out until they're in their late teens anyway, of how I actually learn. You learn certain concepts easily, and you don't really connect it to, I learned this because this teacher always had us do this all the time.
I know that, but sometimes when you get a really great teacher, mm-hmm. and if you're lucky enough to have a great teacher, it does change the trajectory of how you want to learn.
For sure.
I find that teachers' influence is a major component to mm-hmm. whether or not you're going to have a good student, especially in the early years.
Oh, yeah. I mean, there's so many dynamics that is to pick apart one thing that helps is very difficult. But a good teacher, maybe a good classroom, maybe there's a classroom that just happens to be full of learners and everyone's supportive and everybody wants to really challenge themselves, then that can rub off on you as well. There's so many things in just an environment, maybe an understanding teacher versus a more strict teacher. And I don't think either one of them are bad or good. It's just all what's suitable for the learner. And being able to have a good teacher, for sure, since they're the center of attention and they're the captain of the ship, it does have some type of benefit, indeed.
So when we go through the work that you do, and we can distinguish between all the different levels of learners, at what point do you want an intervention when you realize that maybe your child, and this would happen early, is on the spectrum, or that you are dealing with a learning disability? You want people to feel hope. You want people to feel like they have a child that is still going to excel and is still going to do well. It's just in finding their own individual ways to do this.
Right.
So I want to talk a little bit about the academic side and then move into the emotional side, because then you could be having someone who is on the spectrum, but then who is also being bullied, who then leads it. Like, there's a trickle effect of the experiences that each individual child's going to have.
For sure. I guess with trying to figure out when, early intervention is always the best, but you want to make sure people develop. I don't know, I think kids start walking around 12 months, but if your kid starts walking around 14, it's a minor delay. They still did it. It's something to be concerned about and say, okay, we'll keep watching, because 14 months is a bit after, but it's nothing out of the masses and the ordinary. But if we get to around 18 months, maybe 20 months, we say, man, they're still not walking. We really need some intervention here. You want to give people a chance to develop, but you do it with watching eyes. You do it with concerns. And while they are still developing and while they're having this delay, we still try to intervene, but at that level. And once you start to see gaps, major gaps, is when you say, okay, well, we need major intervention. So things like ASD, you can notice things early, like can be a lack of attention to their environment. Maybe talking is a bit delayed. And then as they start to progress, or as they start to age, and then their peers start to create more gaps in between them, then you say, all right, well, now we really need some intervention for ASD. But ASD is really difficult too, because it's a spectrum. It's so many, like there's some things, if you talk about sensory, there's some sensory things that I highly dislike, like cooking. Those fans on the stove drive me insane. If you could turn one on, I start to malfunction. I start to really have a difficult time coping in this moment. And so if we look at the span or the spectrum of ASD, you want to make sure that...
What do you mean by ASD, just so that...
Autism spectrum disorder,
okay.
Sorry. Autism spectrum disorder, because there's levels of severity. They're formerly known as Asperger's. Everything is under this umbrella of ASD, but Asperger's, the form of it, they tend to be a little bit more capable of everyday functioning independently, as far as going through school and living independently past high school. But there's levels of success for everybody. It's just really tough for parents to come to that moment where they realize and take a step back and say the expectations I have for my kid might have to involve a little bit of shifting, which is difficult.
It's at that point where the parents needing a little bit of therapy also, because it's realizing that the one plan that you had is not necessarily the one that you're going to be following. You're going to be taking a different fork in the road. Right.
In life, period, I think our expectations are what need to be a little bit flexible from time to time, because we expect things like, I expect to go to Dairy Queen and having blizzards and all of a sudden the machine's down. So now my expectations need some shifting. You expect your kids to go to school and behave appropriately, but they go there and for whatever reason, they have some conduct issues. Our expectations are what can weigh heavy on our overall mental health. And for parents to, maybe you have a house full of maybe 3 kids or 2 kids, and one of them is doing fairly well as far as development and meeting all the milestones, and you have one who's a bit different. So the expectations have to shift, and they have to be a little bit flexible because they're developing. Again, I use that word, but it's so true. From age of 5 to the age of 6, you can see a difference in your kid. And from the age of 10 to once we hit puberty and now muscles start to develop and thoughts start to become more independent, you can see a development. So it's for parents to, and I don't want to say you lower your expectations, but you just make them flexible so that when your kid does take a different path in the road, you're able to come around and support that as best possible.
Should our emphasis be based on the academic side of things and where they are and how they're doing there, or the mental health aspect of where our children are at? Because they're going to school and could be having two independent struggles on either side. Where, as a parent or as a teacher, as a therapist, are you focused then on making them healthier or more capable of enjoying life when they have these two struggles?
Yeah, I think it's case by case, but I think overall you want to be holistic. When you try to separate pieces of people, the mind and the heart and then our thinking, and then I think when you look at adversity has like 6 areas, but there's a social adversity, there's emotional adversity, there's mental adversity, and then there's physical adversities. And those things are what really makes a human being. So you want to holistically look at someone and say, well, academics, they're okay. Emotionally, they're not, or vice versa. You want to attend to those areas. I tell people too, mental health is an unseen illness. For the most part, we do have those more serious situations where you have hallucinations and outbursts and breakdowns. But for the most part, ADHD, you can only see it from environment to environment. You say, man, this kid really struggles when it comes to sitting still, or with impulsivity, or you say with depression. And if you didn't know someone and you just saw somebody who was maybe reserved and didn't want to speak much, you might say, I had no idea they were depressed. I thought they were just a quiet individual. You want to care or cater to what is the main point. And I try to make it similar to a medical model. If someone had cancer and they were still going through their treatments and coming to school, you wouldn't say, oh, I know your treatments are really affecting you, but this report needs to be done next week. Like you say, well, is that really important right now? Like, shouldn't we help this person who's on the mend and who's going through this treatment? Shouldn't we really cater to that? Because without their health, how can they perform academically?
It's so true when it does come to that, right? It's just seeing it looking at it through a different lens.
Yeah.
When you see a child who's incredibly shy and withdrawn and not social, how, it's one thing to be like, go make friends.
Yeah.
They can't. They're frozen, at the prospect of having to speak and having to go play and having to outreach to other kids. Like, how do you start that process?
I don't know. I think humor goes a long way, and comfort. A lot of times in life, we just want to be comfortable. You go outside and it's raining. You want to have your raincoat. You want to have your water boots. In the winter, you want to have the best coat possible. You want to be comfortable. With someone who's shy, that might be a personality thing. I'm more so of a watcher, and I'll speak if I have to. I'll watch. That's why the people watching probably suits me well. But I've never been shy. For those who are shy, it's more so working within the realms of their comfort. And if they are comfortable and they are successful and they're still maintaining, they're not being submissive to bullies or people who are being rude, and they're being assertive in the areas that require them to be assertive, and they're experiencing school in a happy way for them, I think that's okay. Because the personality is, one of my best friends is an introvert, and you'll see him, we'll go out like maybe on a Friday, and you won't see him for another 2 weeks because it drains him to be around people. And that's his personality. He's an introvert, and he still goes to work daily. He still goes to the gym. He still is social to his comfortable level. But for him to, hang out, watch Monday Night Football, and then watch the basketball game on Wednesday, it's just not his cup of tea. So
it's just accepting sometimes that just where the comfort level is of these individuals.
Yeah, I would say as long as they're not missing any, it's one thing for a student to be shy and need to ask the teacher a question about the curriculum or the concept they covered in classroom, and they don't do it because they're so shy. I don't want my teacher to think I'm a bad student. I don't want to get up in front of everyone and be the center of attention. But if someone is shy, it says, you know what, I only need one friend, or I like to eat lunch alone because maybe I need to reset. I've had high school. I've had 2 classes in the morning. This is my lunch, and then I have to be forced to go to 2 classrooms in the afternoon. This is my reset, and I need my space. I think that's perfectly fine. Some people are extroverts, and they love to be the center of attention and socialize and, butterfly through the social field. But if not, then it's okay.
Okay. It's okay to be shy. It's okay to be an introvert. It's different when you're being bullied into a certain situation. I'm assuming working with the school board that this has become a much more prevalent situation.
Mm-hmm. Well, bullying is supposed to be a zero tolerance policy. So it's not supposed to be, and I say allowed once someone is aware of it. A lot of times you're not aware of the bullying, especially when it goes to social media. A lot of parents and teachers, they're not connected with kids the way that they are with their peers. So once you're made aware of it, it's supposed to be zero tolerance. And it's giving that person validation that how they feel from being bullied, and trying to encourage, empower, and provide them with the tools to, whether that's therapy, talking about their feelings, or how you can be assertive, how you can say to set your boundaries without being rude, but also without being submissive. So for bullying, and then you want to,
like you've got kids who don't want to go to school because they don't want to have to be confronted by it's a much more, and then it impacts them, and then it impacts them in their youth, and then they have coping mechanisms that will affect them 20 years down there when they're back at the office and there's an office bully. I mean, it's not something that just goes. Just doesn't go away.
It does not. No, it doesn't. And you want to help people manage and navigate through that situation, and let them know that this situation, very unfortunate, and you hate that it happened to them, but there is more to their school experience. There is more to who they are, and this person's view doesn't have to set the tone for their personal perspective or for their experience moving forward.
How do you teach a child that? I mean, you can say that, and I can understand that, but to describe that to a 13 or a 14-year-old kid, that doesn't just soak in and sink in the same way.
So again, this is where the development is cool, and this is theory versus the application. And to tell a kid this, once they've been bullied for the last year, they have probably no trust in the school system. So you really want to gain that trust back and work with them piece by piece, inch by inch, and you want to provide as we say, a reintegration, and make it gradual. Say, you know what, this person here, we can try to keep them out of your classrooms. We can try to give you spots, and I say safe spots lightly because the world doesn't have too many safe spots. But you want to give this kid the comfort and let them know that when you come into our school, for the most part, and usually schools are safe places. They're safe havens. Parents know I go to work, my kids will be there, they'll be good, and I'll come back home and they'll be home where I left them. But you want to make them and try to ease those fears slowly. Say, you know what, let's just come to school and we'll look at your classrooms, we'll look at this, we'll try to see if we can arrange things so you're not in contact with this person. And we'll also address it with this person and their parents to know, again, zero tolerance.
Okay, so you've got a zero tolerance, but I would think it goes much deeper than that. And then from the bullying perspective, why? Reasons there. What are they battling? What are they dealing with on a day-to-day basis? There's the psychology from both aspects. There's
both, because they're both taking part into a shared experience, but just on different sides of the table. The bully, of course, you try to intervene and get to the roots of their anger or their ideals or what have you. And again, this takes time. This takes a connection. Whether you connect with your coach, you say, you know what, you like fighting people, let's put you into this boxing ring. Let's give you this type of outlet so that you can put your energies into a more productive environment. But it takes time, Lianne. It takes a lot of time to talk to people and to walk them through these situations. A lot of kids, as they get older, they're starting to realize that, man, the things I said, the things that I did, they probably weren't the best. I didn't make good decisions, and this impacted someone else's social experience. I always tell people to think about your social experience and how you're impacting other people. So to walk them through that, and again, like you're right, it's not an easy fix. It's not a quick. A lot of things with mental health, it's more going to be a managing. It's not going to be a quick fix. I tell people, usually with medication, if you can rectify the situation with medication, it probably wasn't mental health. It's probably something physiological that was going on, because I'm feeling low, I'm not motivated, and then all of a sudden I take my iron pills and things are better. Well, no, it wasn't depression at all. It was just iron deficiency. But when it's depression, you have to talk through these things and walk through and have people gain experience, reflect, and draw conclusions that can send them further into their futures with a different perspective.
When I was looking on the website, you had talked about something called the 3 C's.
Yep.
What are you referring to there?
Just my personal philosophy. They ask you to think of a philosophy, and my 3 C's when it comes to counseling, and I think this kind of spans into life, is just to have clarity, change, and comfort. Clarity helps us understand ourselves or our situations a little bit better. Without clarity, we don't understand what's going on. We're just kind of floating through our day-to-day experiences. And once you have that clarity, you can then have a decision to say, do I make changes that are beneficial for me? Or do I just keep going on with things that haven't been helpful for my social experience, for my well-being? And if you can make these positive changes, then it takes some comfort to start doing things differently. A lot of times when we're looking at mental health, there's the idea of health, reaction, injury, and then illness. And once you get to the areas of injury and illness, you're trying to make your way back to the reaction and healthy areas. But we don't always choose the most positive things. So we will self-medicate, or we'll skip school to avoid it. We'll do things that aren't helpful for us in the long run. So in order to make these changes and make these more of an everyday practice, you can even say a lifestyle change, it takes some comfort. And that idea of habits, they say minimum 21 days to build a new habit, but they say probably 60 to 90 days. It takes some time for people to become more comfortable, to stand up to people who are, taking my lunch money, or it takes a little bit more time for me to gain the confidence. I mean, that's maybe through therapy, through practice, through modeling, to learn a way to approach my teacher confidently, to ask for help on a situation that I don't understand, or a concept that I don't understand. So I think with the 3 C's, clarity, comfort, and change, I think, in my opinion, it equals growth. And that's what you want as a counselor for your client, is to grow and to understand things differently and to behave differently.
You were talking about, coming in as a client, and that was based on the fact that they actually want to talk to somebody or have the ability, and it's not just a parent or someone saying this is what we're going to be doing.
Right.
And as you had mentioned earlier, you talked about the fact that through music, oftentimes there's a different type of a conversation that's happening, because you don't have to sit there and pour your heart out. There can be other things. So what is this music, mood, health? Did I get it right? No.
Mental health,
mental health, mood, and music. Yes. What is that?
It was just, it's a therapeutic modality that I use for people to open up conversation. It started from my thesis. Again, being a student and trying to make things interesting for me, I didn't want to research endlessly about things that had no interests of mine, or that I wasn't engaged in, looking forward to doing. So I just put music into a counseling situation, long story short, and to determine how this would help people who are going through certain issues, whether that's emotional, whether that's social, whether that's even cognitively. And I use music as a backdoor entry to someone's reflection. Musicians, we put them on a higher pedestal, and I guess rightfully so, maybe not. But they're humans. When you boil it down, they're humans, and they have families, and they go through tragedies. They have celebrations. They have challenges, and they have difficulties, and they usually put that into their music. So if we're listening to a song about a breakup, let's say, and breakups are pretty common in your adolescent years. They happen, from day to day. You say, okay, well, this person is talking about a breakup. And how does that affect you? Well, it affects me because my boyfriend was the center of my universe. And then you say, well, it affects me because my boyfriend was part of my social group, and now he's taking my social group away from me. so on and so forth. So we talk about it. And even though we're talking about a breakup or we're talking about depression, if we say depression, like I'm depressed because my grades aren't going as I want them to, and you say, well, I'm depressed because my parents keep on fighting, we all can talk about depression, but it comes from different triggers or different things in our lives, but it's still depression. And hearing this person sing about it, it makes it relatable. I can say, well, here goes somebody who's speaking to what I'm going through. And it can also help with problem solving, because you say the way this person got through it, maybe I can get through it. And once we find that things, a lot of times with mental health, people feel they're the only ones going through it. And it's sad, but oftentimes it does take people that experience of mental health to say, oh, now I get it. I get why that person was depressed, blah, blah, blah. Maybe I'm going through depression myself, or maybe my mom's going through depression, so now it's affecting me indirectly. But a lot of times people can't really align themselves with it or understand it until they've gone through it. This gives people a way to say somebody is out there going through something similar to what I'm going through.
You tend to do these in a group setting. Or do you find that the group therapy works in this format? I've
done it in group formats. I've done it individually. Individually is really good for the kids who love music. And we're a tuned-in world now. Everyone's walking with ear pods or earphones. Even if you go to Starbucks, you're forced to hear some type of music, elevators. So music is part of our daily lives. And I also use this for people to have something to manage. I say your toolkit. Or I say you need a toolkit to help with your day-to-day mental health. And you can't see your counselor or your therapist day-to-day, just the way you can't see your doctor. I tore my ACL, some years ago, and I could see my doctor once, every few days, or your physiotherapist every few days. But in the meantime, my physio gave me activities to strengthen. Your doctor will say, you have the cold, go home, take these antibiotics, get to sleep, fluids, blah, 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 and come back and see me. Same thing with mental health. Day to day, what can you do to manage? And I think music would be something that's easily accessible and it can be helpful. So day to day, you can find things that help you move through and give you perspective and give you comfort with what you're dealing with. Using these in these groups have been really, really good. I do them in presentations as well. Present to people about mental health topics to make it more normalized and to make it more practical. Because a lot of times, as psychologists, we use jargon and it's really hard to understand. But if we can make this relatable and make it really practical and understanding to people, then I think mental health will be much more in the forefront and easily accepted by the masses.
Okay, but when you're talking about music, listen, I've got a 14-year-old and the music that they're listening to, like the point now when I'm now not cool, like it starts with the music, because I'm just like, what are you listening to? And I like my top 40, right? Like I'm full on into the top 40, but these things and these songs and these lyrics that are coming out, it's almost like, what is this?
Well, I would challenge you to think back when you were 14 and what your parents were saying about your
we
music.
had Madonna and Boy George and Wham, right? Like I'm thinking it's a very different language that they're speaking.
It is. Well, I'm huge in rap and hip hop. So even me growing up at certain times, there were certain songs that my mom would be like, that's kind of cool. And then certain songs she's like, no, that's not going to fly in my car. But this music is going to be subjective. And that's the thing about this, too. This is subjective. This is what speaks to you. So even with rap music, I have a nephew who's 11. And the things that he listens to, they're not explicit. But even the rappers now, I'm just like, man, this is different rap. And it's rap. So whatever speaks to him, and he loves it. He loves it, and he thinks this is the hottest thing ever. And I can't let it play longer than 30 seconds. So what is important is that things speak to your daughter or speak to that person, because that way they can relate a lot better. And I'm not saying these misguided lyrics and these things that are, profane. However,
but how is it working? If our kids are feeling a certain way and we're playing certain music, like what is it doing? Like when you're using this as a tool, as part of your toolbox, how is it being incorporated?
It's being incorporated because it's a lyrical analysis. So a lot of people are really familiar with the cognitive behavioral therapy, and it's an approach that we use in therapy. I'm using this as just a cognitive approach. Lyrically, we're going to analyze these lyrics, and we're going to listen to what the person is talking about. Now, sometimes they are profane, and sometimes life, I think, is best unedited. But at the same time, we're looking at the themes and how this person is using words to express their emotions.
Okay. As a 14-year-old, I get it. They're downloading their own music on their independent phones. As a 6-year-old, they're not exposed to that, right?
No.
They're exposed to whatever mom and dad's listening to in the radio or whatever's popped up on their device. So how are you able to differentiate between a musical therapy for 14 and a musical therapy for a 6 or 7-year-old?
It's a good question, because this was based on college students when I started using it. So it's really good. And I would even 14-year-olds, I think, may struggle with it just because of experience. They can still relate to it, but the experiences of saying, I can understand that, or I know what they're talking about. They can listen to the story just like they can watch a movie and say, oh, that's a cool movie. But to say that I can relate to it is difficult, but we still work with it. For younger kids, you use this for more like irrational rhymes. It's kind of like when kids are, again, you're planting the seed. So with my 3-year-old nephew, when playtime is up, toys away, no more play, come back in another day. Things like that. You would use this to put down, I guess, morals or ideals. There was a guy, I can't remember his name, but he did rational rhymes. This is kind of what sparked me to use music, because he would use rational rhymes to teach kids certain lessons and certain ideas that they could talk about it and they could rhyme. It's kind of like your A, B, C, D, E, F, G, like your A, B, C, D. The kids, they sing it. But, some kids struggle with that LMNOP type thing. They say, oh, what is that?
It took me a while to realize that those were all different letters. I think we all did, right? Yeah.
So for them to have the seeds planted, and now you use that for them just to be able to, now we've sung the song, now A, B, C, this is what an A looks like. So parents are really, really, really important in this mental health or in this development, because you're the biggest models in their life and you're the most influential in their life. So for us to have these rhymes, to sing them, and then now to apply them, again, theory and application, they go hand in hand, but one is harder than the other. Once you can use those with the little kids, as they get older, 7, 8, then it becomes a common practice. Okay, yeah, I have to put my shoes away, or I have to go put my computer away because I'm going downstairs for dinner or whatever.
So even independent original song making by parents of going through tasks around the house, like we can all come up with our own little jingles.
Yeah, you can. Sure. If I think a lot of parents, from what I hear, they struggle with lunch making. What's going to be helpful for the kid, and why is this returning? I made a full lunch for this kid to eat these cucumbers, yet they don't eat it, and then they come home and they eat all the cucumbers in the fridge. What's going on here? So even like a little jingle like that for parents to navigate that for themselves, I think for your own well-being, not for the kids. But yeah, I think for you to have your own little jingles is perfectly cool.
Okay, so we are, when this podcast goes to air, we are early in the school year. Mm-hmm. How long do you suggest, as we're kind of wrapping these up, that parents are aware or that are in tune with watching their children, seeing the behavior when they leave in the morning and seeing the child that's coming back in the house at the end of the day? Mm-hmm. At what point do they start to kind of make notes or kind of just follow along certain patterns to realize this is on par, this is not okay, this is where we need to start bringing in somebody else?
I think monitoring is always good. Like I said, from day to day, kids change. But once you start to see some patterns where you say, Dave never really was like this. He always was outgoing and he loved hockey. Now he doesn't want to play hockey or whatever. You start to make these notes, and then you have conversations. I always say, like, again, your tribe. That's going to be coaches. That's going to be teachers. That's going to be your community. So you say, Dave is struggling at home. Do you see this at school? No, at school, he's pretty good. He's out there. He was line leader, and he's always offering this insight. But once you start to see things, and if you're always concerned, you can always talk to your kid. You can always talk to them and say, how are things? I would suggest to monitor first. Sometimes we suggest things and kids are influenced. They're like, oh, yeah, that is it. It's like, not really. But always have some conversations with your kids and just say, how is school? What's going on? What's new? Who are the new friends? Anything exciting?
Yes, no,
That's what you get.
You're like, honestly, you're going to get one-word answers.
That's what you get. Yeah, then you expand. Say, okay, give mommy some details. Tell me about this friend. Yes, no, okay, so what was it about? And then sometimes if you have concern, never hurts to go in and talk to somebody just to get a consult. just to go in for one session and say, I'm worried about this, blah, blah, blah. I think to talk to teachers to know what developmental milestones they're looking at in the 3rd grade, 4th grade, 5th grade, so on and so forth is important. But you know your kid better than most people. So if you have any concerns, it's never a bad thing. It's kind of like going to the doctor. You know, my ear's been ringing. I want to go and get it checked out. Yeah, no, there's nothing in the ear structurally. And usually sometimes the ear rings. It might be stress or it might be whatever. Give it a few days and we'll see how it goes, right? It never hurts to go consult and talk to people, and we should do it the same way we do with our physical health.
Okay, and just because you mentioned that in my last question, is that they're saying that our kids are more stressed out now than ever before.
Stressed out, probably, but I think it's management. It's one thing that underlies stress, and sometimes with the more serious form of anxiety, which is anxiety, is people feel incapable of doing certain things. They feel that I can't master this test, I can't do this, I can't navigate that. They feel that they're not capable of handling a situation. So stress, yeah, I think expectations. I'm really big on expectations and responsibilities. So people can manage those, then we can bring our stress down. But are kids more stressed now? I don't know. There's always been tests. There's always been exams. But I think their ability.
Yeah, I do agree. I agree with that. There's always been tests and exams, but they're becoming, as we sometimes think that we're becoming less competitive, like participation. Everyone gets a participation badge, but really at the end of the day, people are still competing against each other. They're competing now against social media and likes and how many followers and friends. Like, there are much different issues that go far beyond their schooling and their sports.
It does, but I think for people and for parents, again, to have these conversations to let people know. And again, you're planting seeds that what we see over there, that's not important. Like, that shirt, that's a cool shirt, but you don't need that shirt. You need a shirt that you like. You need a shirt that speaks to you, that expresses yourself. You don't have to follow people. You help them find the internal qualities that are worth admiration within them. It's like, you know what, you don't have to be like them. You don't have to follow the trend. If you want to, that's fine too. But don't think because you don't have or because you're not as tall or as pretty or whatever, that's a deficiency. No, it's a difference. And having them warm up and grow into that difference and that uniqueness.
School is full in session. For some people, they'll have the opportunity to be able to make an appointment and see a specialist and maybe get in for a little bit of counseling. What would be the steps then? Is it the teachers, the school board, the independent counseling? Where do you suggest people go?
All the above. Through the school board, you would contact the teacher or the guidance counselor if they're older. Teachers then make the referrals to the learning support teachers or the guidance counselors, and then they have meetings and they discuss the waiting lists and the need priority, which is hard to figure out. And then from there, they would meet with a school psychologist or a social worker or a behavioral specialist if it's something emotional or maybe so much social. Speech language pathologist if there's some language difficulties. But it could take a while because I think there's 40 school board psychologists last year, at least at the OCDSB, roughly that, and there's like 100 and something schools. So we're being torn in different ways. Okay,
so then how long would you suggest a parent allow the system to take over, or if they have the means to take care of it themselves?
That's going to be a parental decision. But but if they could, they monitor, they do have the means, it does go quicker. But even with my private practice in Ottawa, I think my waiting list was like 8 weeks last time I checked, 8 to 10 weeks. So again, that's why management in between and creating this toolkit is really, really important, because in the meantime, like, you can't build a house with just a hammer. You need a lot of tools. With the music and with other things, positive relationships, exercise, self-care, those type of things. And it sounds really, really general and ineffective, but those are things that consist of our mental health. So if you can, by all means, go ahead and go contact a private practitioner. That could be a psychologist, social worker, a psychotherapist. They all can carry out counseling. So, yeah.
And carry out the testing.
Testing is psychologists only. Well,
okay.
There's different.
So let me. So when you're making that call and you're looking for that testing, or to be able to understand or to have some clarity on where they're their brain is functioning.
Let me reframe. Yes.
Okay.
So for psychoeducational testing, which is a cognitive test, and an educational test, you would usually go to a psychologist for that.
Okay. And that falls under if your child is ADD, ADHD, has a learning disability, a dyslexia.
Learning disabilities, specific learning disorders for sure. ADHD, your medical doctor can diagnose that as well.
Okay.
Yeah. So that might be an avenue for you as well.
Okay. Or speak to the doctor about that and then follow the trickle down effect as to where you're wanting to do some of the testing.
Yeah.
Everyone's looking, they want to give their child the best advantages that they can.
Right. And I think we all should, but know that your kids, they can manage. They just have to walk through it with the guidance and with the support, because things like ADHD, they don't go away. You people learn how to manage better. So and that's why I'm really cautious about doing those type of diagnoses, especially so early when kids are developing. Because once you put that on someone, that type of label or that type of diagnosis, essentially it should be lifelong. And now people learn how to redirect their attention, or people learn, like myself, I think I'm probably undiagnosed ADHD. Once I'm in a meeting for too long or a seminar for too long, I'm the one that stands up in the back corner because I'm starting to drift or I'm starting to fall asleep. And not because it's boring, just because I can't sit still for longer than a good 30 minutes. That's when I start to clock out.
Okay. What's funny is I have a lot of friends later in life, like after 30, that were starting to go in for, I think I've been ADHD my entire life. And I have friends who've gotten on medication later in life and who are like, gosh, I wish I'd had known this early. I would have done so much better. I would have taken a different path. So it's being aware, right? It's having the dialogue and the discussions. People can find you where?
They can find me at elapsychology.com. I'm also at Cetera Psychological and Counseling Services, which is in Stittsville on the weekends. You can email me at elapsychology@gmail.com, and I'm also starting a private practice down in Kingston, so I'll be there for most of the weeks at out of JD Physiotherapy, ELA Psychological and Counseling Services.
Okay, you're a mixture of a whole bunch of different places.
Got my hand in everything.
Well, I really appreciate the time in this, and it's just opening the dialogue, I think, for parents and for students to realize you have a lot of years in school, a lot of years of learning, and to be able to maneuver your way through it as best as you can so you can get the most out of it. Really appreciate the time. I'll have all the information and all of the links in the show notes as well, and really appreciate everyone who's listening, subscribing, liking, sharing, talking about the Living Your Life with Lianne Laing podcast. Appreciate the support and continuing to see everything grow. Have a great day.